Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.
Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. With me today is Jordan River, host of the Growcast podcast. Thank you very much for joining me today, Jordan.
Hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate you guys.
Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. Jordan, I always like to start with a little bit of background. So tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you first get involved in the cannabis industry?
Well, let's see. That's a very interesting question. I guess it started when I was a teenager and my medical cannabis use, my cannabis use kind of turned from recreational to medical. I started suffering from seizures. And so I was introduced to medical cannabis very young, like I said, in my later teens, because they helped so much after a grand mal seizure, the bad kind where you're flopping on the ground. And it was a really rough time. And the only thing that helped me recover after those seizures was cannabis. So very early on, I realized that this was a stigmatized medicine, plant medicine, essentially. And that set me on my path and passion for cannabis. From there, I moved to Humboldt County when I was 20 years old. That was in 2010, and pursued a career of growing. My father actually encouraged me. He saw on Time magazine the big cannabis leaf on the front page. He wasn't a big cannabis consumer at the time, but had used it in the past and knew that it wasn't, the same as these other hard drugs sort of thing. So he encouraged me to go check out the industry in Northern California. He said, you have an uncle out there who could plug you right into the scene. And he did. And I connected with my cousin who connected me to the grow store where I met Wolfman. If you listen to Growcast podcast, some of the oldest episodes are done with my buddy Wolfman, and we started the show. So again, 2010, I started growing professionally. I grew for 5 years, supplying different dispensaries out there in the Emerald Triangle, just growing from my little setup in my house. We turned on the microphones in 2014. I think the earliest rendition of Growcast was 2015. And you can even still find episodes that saw the light of day and are still out there from 2016. So we're coming up on about 10 years, give or take, depending on, again, when you count turning on the microphones versus the show actually being what it is today. And now it's grown over those years into my full-time job. I'm super, super grateful and fortunate. And I feel very obligated to continue to produce great content for growers and to get other people growing and to introduce more people to this awesome plant medicine that still has a lot of room for growth. I feel like we're on a mission, as a whole, when it comes to producing this plant and providing people medicine. And I'm on a mission of overgrow, which is getting as many people to grow as possible. Because if everybody who did grow, because if everybody who wanted to grow did grow, there would be enough for everyone to go around. So that's kind of me and my story. I focus on home grower and commercial cultivation when it comes to education. And I'm very, very fortunate to have this as a full-time job now.
Talking about the average consumer, it is wild to me how anyone that uses it medicinally, sort of the buy-in in terms of cannabis as a plant medicine is so much quicker than just trying to get your average curious consumer involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you say that. I have been thinking about this a lot. And to me, I've been thinking about the differentiation between recreational cannabis and medical cannabis. And it's funny because you don't want to mix up the products because you're not going to be able to distinguish them. It's the same thing is what I'm saying. And I really think it is the same thing, almost down to a use by use basis, by which I mean, who's not using cannabis medicinally, right? If you say well, I don't have cancer, right? I'm not treating epilepsy, but I use it to relax at the end of the day. Well, you're using it to reduce the inflammation in your body. You're getting a dose of these terpenes, which are usually found in nature, being out in the woods and smelling wildflowers and hunting and foraging. That's usually where we get these compounds into our system. And now here's a little dose of nature that seems to be very therapeutic to you. I think the word therapeutic is very applicable in these senses. And even people who I'm sure there are people out there who just smoke the strongest stuff they can get to get as messed up as I can. Well, I bet if you talk to those people and got to know them, they're probably still treating something. They probably have some sort of trauma in their life. There's probably a reason they're trying to escape the common experience of reality and be altered in an altered state. And the bottom line is cannabis is used for a wide variety of purposes, and it is so benign when it comes to its side effects. If your goal is harm reduction, there's not many other medicines out there with as few side effects and as few consequences from high doses as cannabis. So I've thought about that differentiation before. It's very interesting.
Well, and it's also difficult to quantify because just the realities of operating in the medical side of the market, there's just a little bit more red tape, a little bit more regulation. And so you hear a lot of reports of people are just sticking with rec because it's just easier to walk into a dispensary and buy it, even though there are a couple of other benefits for you to stay in the medicinal side. And I think that really blurs the lines. So you don't see how many people are truly using it medically.
It's funny because what are we treating this thing as, right? Is it a medicine? Because those are totally different standards, pharmacological standards when it comes to things like mold and yeast count. Suddenly it's super complicated. Or are we treating this more like alcohol, right? Which is this controlled substance that we distribute to those who are of age to consume. I would love to see it treated more like coffee or more like any other plant. Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of plants that can mess you up that you can grow in your backyard. You can grow salvia, you can grow different cacti that will mess your world up, but nobody's freaking out about these plants, right? I think medical can sometimes be too restrictive. There are a lot of organic growers that I know are in states who can't grow in a living soil in an organic fashion because it flags the tests. The mold from the soil it'll be a very, very slow count. So it's not harmful, but it's there. And if it's a pass or fail type situation, and it can affect that. So the way we classify this thing and the way that we try to cram it into these other structures, like, treat it like alcohol or treat it like pharmaceuticals, I think we get away from the truth, which is this is a plant. It comes from a seed. It has a lot of value. Anyone can grow it in your backyard. And I'm not sure that it's a one-to-one equivalent to either alcohol or pharmaceuticals.
So what messes you up more, coffee or cannabis?
Well, I mean, caffeine will kill you. Caffeine will kill you dead. Mm-hmm. So there's one thing, right? Like if you take too much caffeine, you're in for a bad time, and people consume that drug every single day. Now, one makes you notably more productive. So I think it fits into our post-industrial revolution, modern 9-to-5 type lifestyle. So I think that's why it's less stigmatized. But those are the two. I don't know if you know that I've done shows on coffee before and stuff, but those are the two most potent plant medicines that we consume on a regular basis, cannabis and coffee. If you look at the health studies, first of all, coffee is the most studied food product on planet Earth. And doctors still don't agree if it's good for you or bad for you. So bad news to everyone who thinks that more cannabis research is going to fix everything. It doesn't. They research the heck out of coffee, but what they do find is massive disease reduction. Neuroprotectants. It's a neuroprotectant against Alzheimer's and dementia. Cannabis is the same way. If there's two things you could incorporate into your lifestyle for disease prevention, coffee and cannabis are way up there when they're sourced correctly and grown correctly and not covered with harmful pesticides.
So when you say you'd like to see it more like the coffee industry, when you look at the current state of the cannabis industry, what do you like about it? What do you not like about it? What would you like to change?
Oh, man, these are great questions. Again, I think accessibility is key. I think that regulation equals stigma. This is a plant that you can grow in your backyard. Let's take a look at cannabis versus coffee. One grows a bean. It's a stimulant. And it is a powerful psychoactive. It gets you messed up just like coffee does, just like cannabis does. Now, the difference is coffee is extremely hard to grow. You can't just grow coffee in your backyard. It only grows in certain climates. It takes years to produce. It's very, very finicky. Anyone can grow cannabis. I can teach you how to grow cannabis and sit down with you for a couple of hours and outline how to grow your own at home, and you'll have infinite flower for the rest of your life. Like it's too easy not to treat like something like any other plant. And I think that honestly, the people who want to capitalize off of regulating the plant know this. They know that you can just take a single seed that big and you can grow pounds of the stuff with just some water and some dirt. They don't want you to do that. They know there's a bunch of value in this plant. It's valuable medicinally, it's valuable recreationally, it's valuable from a textile perspective, and they want to get in between you and the plant and take some of that value. Now, I think that's markedly different than working in the industry and providing value to growers, to cultivators, to patients. That's different. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about making a buck, right? I'm talking about the regulators who say, no, 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 no. You can't have that many plants. 6 is too much. Well, why? Tell me why. Give me a good reason why. I don't think there's a single moral, defensible situation that you can say that 6 plants is wrong or dangerous and 5 plants isn't. So to answer your question more specifically, accessibility is my number one thing. I want to see more home growing laws. What sickens me the most is when states come online and they're going to make a bunch of money selling you this plant, but not allow you to grow it. I think that's criminal. I think that's indefensible, whether it's recreational or medical. And I want to see plant counts higher. You know, I understand like you don't want someone running a fly by night, huge operation, but we don't treat that way. We don't treat it that way with alcohol. I'm sure there's certain limits, but it's just a non-issue. So for me, I'm plant focused and I'm patient focused. Man, the more I learn about the history of this plant, it's been around forever. Forever, humans have had their hands on it. I just want to keep it that way. I don't want it protected or gate kept by anyone. I want everyone to have access. I want as many people growing as possible. And I want as many people involved in the industry as possible, pushing this stuff forward. So I hope that's not too rambling of an answer.
No, not at all. I mean, but to that point, do you feel that is a realistic and achievable goal?
So that's a really great question. I live in my little grower bubble, which is growing is easy to me, right? Like it's overwhelming to the average person. Can we get everyone to grow their own? Absolutely not. That is not something that's going to happen. People are busy. People are interested in other things. People are intimidated by the process. Maybe they just don't want to grow no matter how easy it is. Totally understand that. But if you look at the ratio of smokers to growers, there's like 90 million smokers in the United States. If I could just get 1% of people who consume to start growing their own medicine at home, you're going to save money. It's going to be healthier because you won't be spraying it with anything. You know exactly what goes on it. And it's going to be a higher quality because it's going to be fresh and it's going to be the strain that you picked. 1%, 900,000 people. That's what I'm looking to do. I'm making to look make a big impact with a small dent. But I appreciate that question, which is like, we growers get so obsessed with cultivation. It's just like, everyone should grow. You should grow. You should grow. You should grow. I'm just trying to make a little bit of a dent and encourage people again to get into my position, which is I'm no longer a professional cultivator. Professional cultivation is hard right now in a lot of places, but you can still provide value. You can still create a product that people utilize, that patients utilize, that cultivators utilize, making our lives as growers easier, simpler, better. Education, like what I do. These are where the magic happens, you guys. I'm not down with the big corporate entities that come into a state and immediately start lobbying against things like home grow. That's what I'm not down with. There's not a lot of things that we are opposed to at Growcast, but that's one of them. We need patient accessibility and access to the plant.
You had mentioned your experience as a commercial cultivator. You know, what was your experience like, and why did it kind of steer you more towards this home grow mentality?
I was a smaller sized cultivator compared to what people are doing now, right? I had a 16 light operation going in Humboldt and was able to still produce craft scale and sell right to a dispensary. And I loved it. Those are some of the best years of my life. It was the gray market medical California time. And I mean, honestly, there's a lot of people who would argue those times were better, right? The quality, I feel, was certainly better. The quality of the average grower. There were still a bunch of craft farmers out there. A lot has changed with rec. And that's really something that I was the victim of, right? I was able to do that by myself, largely with no help for years until the prices started to drop. The reality is, going back to comparing it to coffee, you know, coffee sells, the growers sell coffee for dollars on the pound. And honestly, that's where cannabis is headed to. Not a terribly hard crop to grow. I saw the price plummet coming from far, far away. And that's when I decided there's actually a lot of reasons that I closed up shop, some like personal stuff and moving back to be with family. But I decided the numbers are going low and they're going to keep going down. And they did. And they should. That's the really hard part. Um, that's the hard thing to say to cultivators, which is it shouldn't be that much more expensive than a bouquet of sunflowers. It's hard to grow sunflowers, right?
Yeah.
Cannabis is really no different. It's just a plant that's really easy to grow and it should be treated that way. Now, my time as a commercial cultivator was different and I loved it because I was working with patients one-on-one. I remember coming into the dispensary with my lemon wreck. It was a lemon train wreck. And some sweet old lady was in there buying her meds. And she goes, and it was like serendipitous. It was like God had shined down because I was there with the dispensary owner and she's over here and we didn't know her. And she's like, I just love that lemon wreck. It's so good. It's so medicinal. And I'm like, yeah, keep going. But really that was one of the memories that I really hold on to because that was somebody who was getting relief from something that I created. And I don't get to do that anymore, which is a shame, but that's okay because I get to do this. And this is tons of fun too.
Well, and I understand the relationship, why people talk about why you should grow your own, if only once, just to get a better understanding of the plant, have a better connection to it. But what do you tell people that have a brown thumb?
Okay, this is a great question. The first thing you said, I want to hammer down on and agree with. If you are a business owner in this space, if you're an investor in this space, just growing the plant one time will give you such an insight to how the whole process works. Even if you're just growing it in a pot in your house, it's going to give you a competitive advantage to better understand your customers and to better understand the product. And this is the product. So that is a very, very astute point, which is if you're in this space on a professional level, just grow to understand this thing better. Now, you make a really good point. Some people just kill plants to death. I can't even keep a house plant alive. I'm actually working on a beginner's course designed exactly for that person. And what I'll say is there's a lot of really good tutorials out there on YouTube and on different podcasts already. And if you follow them step by step, you will do better than just trying to take care of a houseplant on your own. But that being said, I'm designing something that's like literally ease is the number one thing that this course is designed around. And it's designed around these certain type of planters. If someone's looking to grow and they're not good at growing, look into an earth box. It's a sub-irrigated planter. Long story short, there's soil, but there's a water reservoir underneath. The roots grow down into the water reservoir. So what this means is after a week or two, you don't water the soil because that's why you're killing your plants, by the way. You have a brown thumb because you're overwatering or underwatering. Hands down, every time. I don't even need to look at your grow. That's why you're killing everything. It's because of watering. Well, with these systems, you just pour water down a tube. You don't water the dirt anymore. You pour water down a tube until the reservoir is full and the plant drinks from there. So long story short, there are certain ways to grow that make it really, really easy for the people who have a brown thumb.
Well, I like the idea, and I'm excited to see your educational track. I think that'll be, in high demand. What do you think of some of these, smaller regional colleges that have started offering courses and even certifications when it comes to cultivation?
God, you got some really good questions, man. The certification stuff is wild to me. I don't know if there's any like recognized bodies out there that really that are going to allow you to break into a certain part of the industry that you couldn't otherwise. That being said, I love to see colleges and universities getting in on the hemp stuff. Those are really, really great. They tend to be like more traditional ag, right? They approach it from a different area. They're usually dealing with hemp. But I do love to see the universities getting involved. That I would really encourage anybody to do. If you're interested in the plant and going the traditional ag route, getting into a university with a good cannabis program just for learning. But the certification stuff, either inside the university or outside of the university, is wild to me as a legacy grower because it's funny. It's a funny thing. Like, I'm a master grower. My certificate says so. But as far as education, I think it's great. I think it's all good. The more research, the better.
Do you have fears over quote unquote big cannabis?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I think that's one of the biggest threats to cannabis. Cannabis and the ability to produce it on your own without anybody else interfering or profiting that is a large industry. It's a industry with a lot of revenue, potential revenue, and it threatens a lot of long-standing kind of oligarchies in America. What does it threaten? Big alcohol, big tobacco, big pharma. These are people who look at their market share very territorially. There's a reason why Wisconsin hasn't legalized. It might have something to do with the booze lobbyists. That it's got some of the most wealthy alcohol lobbyists in the United States, and that could have something to do with it. So what's funny is once certain cannabis organizations grow to that same size, they instantly start to reflect those other long-standing institutions. They instantly start to go, this is my market share. I don't want home grow legal because people are going to grow this product at home and they're not going to come buy from me. It's when you put profits above patients and profits above the plant that this happens. I don't think there's anything wrong with having a cannabis company. I don't think there's anything wrong with growing your cannabis company, for being a multi-state operator. None of these things inherently are evil or bad or wrong. The problem is when you see these MSOs grow big enough, sometimes they turn around and use their power to chokehold the market. They try to limit licenses, which I think is bad. They try to eliminate home grow, which I think is absolutely indefensible. And they end up doing more harm than good. And frankly, this is not true across the board. And I don't try to be spicy too often, but frankly, they don't produce that great of quality. The bigger they are, the worse quality they produce. I rarely see these big MSOs putting out good medicine. Let's put it that way. That's a kind way to put it. So yeah, absolutely. Big cannabis scares me just like big tobacco. I think they have a lot of the same interests to claw back, and frankly, claw back all the entrepreneurs who are doing their thing too. I'd like to see individual freedoms and a true free market in this space. That is really what I'm championing more than anything, is less restriction.
Do you think there is a way to serve both masters? And is there, where both big cannabis and home grow could thrive in the market?
Yeah. And it will, and it does, right? That is exactly how it's going to be. The difference is there's a lot of people putting a lot of money into marketing their big cannabis, and there's not a lot of people championing home grow very well. It's something that I hope to do a little bit better. The only answer is to do it yourself. Sitting around and complaining isn't going to do anything. And to that point, it really is like, which stance do you want to take? Pragmatic or idealistic? So yes, cannabis companies get big and they start lobbying. They can also lobby for good things, right? It depends on how cynical you are of our system, right? I think the way that you can get things done in America is by having enough capital to make influence in politics. And if that can get people out of jail or bring another state online, I'm not saying those are bad things, right? I am just a little bit more cynical, and I know how a lot of these kind of forces operate, where they get into a market, they try to grab as much market share as they can, and they try to restrict other people from coming in. I would like to see a little bit more of a symbiosis, like you're saying. Like I said, 1%. 1% people. I don't think that's going to make anybody angry. I'm just trying to make a little dent. There's already plenty of people marketing the MSOs. I'm going to try to take a little bit of a stance and market the home grow side, which is just telling people you're allowed to do this. Hey, you're allowed to do this. It's really easy and it's really fun, So, but yes, to answer your question, I do think they will coexist. And I wish they would just stop attacking each other. I mean, really on both sides. I wish we could just all get along and try to push reform, allow home growers to grow, and the dispensaries will always have plenty of money. The MSOs will always have plenty of market share. That's how I feel anyways.
Well, as we push reform, and we have like 37 states and territories that have some form of legalization now. But is there anything more than true like foreshadowing of what big cannabis might look like? Or is it once we truly have descheduling, then we'll see the full weight of what big cannabis could look like?
Man, I don't think I'm smart enough to answer that properly. I can give you my opinions, but I'm also not the biggest politics guy, because I feel like you get pulled into the mire. That's why I focus on teaching people to grow, but obviously home grow laws go along with that, right? Like I need to have one foot in politics to do what I do. But that being said, I'm not smart enough to answer. I don't know what that will look like. I will tell you this: Florida is a good example to take a look at right now. Shout out to in Growcast membership, our Southeast chapter captain is a guy named the Flower Farm That's with a PH, farm with a PH. Must follow on Instagram. And he posts all sorts of spicy memes and talks about the MSOs and all this stuff. But he's got his finger on the pulse of Florida and what's happening there, and how they're trying to transition from a medical market to a rec market. Their medical market has no home grow. It's all MSOs. The rec bill is being pushed by MSOs. You got one side saying yes on this measure. You have to vote yes. It's gonna decriminalize. It's gonna help people. And the other people saying this measure is a chokehold for corporate cannabis. They're not going to allow home grow. They're not going to allow competition, and they're going to completely gobble up the market. I'm not smart enough to say this or that will happen, or even say this or that is good. Obviously, I'm hoping that they add home grow rights, but take a look at that example and study it well, because that's the new model. It's not medical California going into a doctor anymore. It's how do I turn on this industry and chokehold it as much as I can from one side.
You know, in your opinion, what are some of the biggest challenges that home grow faces right now?
Like I said, lack of exposure. There's no big incentive to get people to growing their own. I have a little $15 a month Patreon. I teach people how to grow their own. That's how I get by. So obviously this is my thing, but it's not, there's not a lot of money in it. That's the truth. There's not a lot of money in it. So why would anyone promote it? So you take a look at our community, what's left of the cannabis culture, what it was born from, right? And it's like, yeah, we're all for overgrow. Yeah, everybody should grow. Maybe even give out free seeds, but it's so insular. We're stuck in our little world. We're not bringing in fresh new blood. That's the problem. I mean, right there, that's the problem with home grow, is there's nobody out there representing our interests and doing it well. Like I said, doing it as well as the $1 million marketing team that this MSO has. Like, who's doing that? I can't do that. I'm not I'm not smart enough or have enough of that capital to do something like that, but I'm trying my damnedest. I'm going to create a super streamlined, simple guide. I'm going to get out there and I'm going to hit the bricks. But that's the biggest challenge that home grow faces. People don't even know they're allowed to grow. And then when they find out, they're super intimidated and they usually don't try. So I'm trying to fix that.
I mean, is part of that like that there are already, you know, the strength in numbers is there or could potentially be there from home growers, but people are also maybe a little reticent to raise their hand and say, this is what I do and this is why it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people are scared to do that even in legal states. I think the stigma still holds over. You know what I mean? I think that people don't tell their family a lot of the time that they're big into cannabis. And destigmatization is really the name of the game. And I think that that's actually come a long way. I do think it's gotten much better, certainly since I was a kid, the stigma of cannabis. And it's the funny thing about stigma against plant medicines. Here's a little secret. Here's a little philosophical secret to hold as you walk through life. It's easy to just kind of hand wave away any benefits of plant medicine until it affects you or somebody you love. Until it affects you or somebody you love. So you see the politician who struck down, illegal cannabis in his state over and over and over. And then you find he was secretly supplying his epileptic son with CBD oil. Oh, well, there you go. That's the truth. Doesn't matter what you're saying or how you're voting. That's the truth. It struck close to home. It's not about safety. It's not about your morals. It's not about anything. It wasn't useful to you until it was. And now it is. Now you understand it. So a truly enlightened person is able to have that experience without it having to affect them, be able to empathize and say, this is helping somebody here, right? That's usually not the case humans work. Usually you come down with some effed up stuff or you have a seizure and you're all scrambled after and you feel like death and someone gives you weed and you go, holy shit, this makes me feel all better. And nothing that the doctor prescribes will do that after a seizure. Nothing that the doctor prescribes will make you hungry as a patient undergoing chemotherapy. Nothing. So it's important stuff, man. Like I said, I want to make a big impact with just a small change.
Well, we talked about the big MSOs and we talked about home grows. What do you feel is the role of like smaller scale or craft cannabis? You know, And can it survive?
I think you'd look at different markets and you see different things. So California is the worst example of driving out the craft producers. California was the cannabis capital of the world, to be honest. You think of Amsterdam, you think of Jamaica, you think of Humboldt County, and they were known for quality, the best growers in the world, the best genetics in the world. Man, California ruined them with recreational. I used to live there. It was all craft farmers. There were some bigger ones, and you see like the Netflix documentary like Murder Mountain. Like there was definitely some criminal aspects, but man, as somebody who lived there, I never saw that. It was mostly just people like me who were growing for a living and making hay while the sun shined. Recreational comes. Now you got to have all these new licenses and you got to wait for this and you got to pay for that regulation. And oh, you didn't do it right. And we're shutting you down and we're shutting you down. And we're using regulation as the new sledgehammer to smash you, as opposed to criminality as the sledgehammer to smash you. We're raiding your farm because your license expired, right? There are stories that show some of those raids and sad things that happened during them. So they drove out all the craft farmers of California. It's sad what's happened to California. Take a look at Michigan, on the other hand. Michigan's doing pretty well. You can go to the dispensary there and get some quality flower from some middling farm, not middling as in quality, but middling sized, craft sized farmers. You can also find some MSO stuff. It's a good blend. Prices are okay. It's not like Illinois where they tax the F out of it and it's completely unaffordable. The way that you craft regulations and the way that you enforce them determines how healthy your cannabis market ends up. And I think that some of the good examples are states like Michigan. I hear Maine is another good example. I haven't personally experienced it, but that's another one that I hear is doing really good, versus some of the states like California or Oklahoma, where they're cracking down on their own industry as if they were still criminals. I think it depends.
Going back to the history of Growcast, how did you start it? What were some of the pitfalls that you had along the way? And at what point did you finally realize, like, hey, I've got something here?
Man, I fired up the microphones. Like I said, 2014, the name Growcast came around in 2015, and the show goes back to 2016 that you can still listen. That's a long time, man. Mm-hmm. I was doing shows for nobody. I was doing shows for no one for a long time and for no money for a longer time than that. But I remember I used to be on SoundCloud before. I wonder if Libsyn, maybe Libsyn was around. Anyways, like I was back on SoundCloud posting my episodes, just seeing how many downloads I could get. And I remember one day pretty early on, like in the first year or so, I'd say I got 300 downloads on one of my shows. And I looked at the analytics and it was from all over the world. People were listening to me. And I was like, wow, 300 people. That's a lot of fuck. I could fill a room with 300 people. And it was this weird moment. Podcasting was still early on. And it was this weird moment where I was like, I could just keep doing this and this number is going to grow. And it did. Podcasting itself grew and the boom and bust of COVID played a big role into it. But I did the show for negative money for probably, let's see, from when I started in 2015, probably 5 or 6 years. I just did the show because people liked it and because people would write me and say, you've helped me. You helped my grow, or you got me into growing and I have this disease and you're helping my cancer or my grandma who has cancer. And it's like, that's the shit that keeps me going, man, right there. That's what kept me going. And I did think of quitting 3 or 4 times, you know what I mean? Where I almost quit and focused full time on poker. I'm a big Texas Hold'em fan.
Okay.
I was like a semi-pro for a while, paying my rent with poker.
Awesome.
And I was like, man, this Growcast thing, like this, nobody's listening. This Growcast thing sucks. No one's going to care about this. I'm never going to make $1. I could just play cards. What am I doing speaking into this microphone? But I kept with it. I'm so glad that I didn't just like go focus to be a gambler. I'm so glad that I stuck with it. And yeah, the show blew up during COVID. We started our membership where now we work with growers one-on-one through our Patreon. Like I said, it's $15. I feel we provide a tremendous amount of value for that. And I love it. I've met some of my best friends, like actual best friends through the community. So it's been insane. What was the question?
I mean,
sorry.
No. Talking about passion projects, do you find that a lot of people in the cannabis industry, started here because of it was a passion project or labor of love?
You need to. Here, let's get into some entrepreneurial advice. And this is, again, this isn't business advice. This is life advice. This is mind state advice. You need the passion. I believe to start virtually any business in any field, but definitely in cannabis, because you're going to get your teeth kicked in business and in the cannabis industry, and the checks aren't going to be coming in, and it's going to have taken hours of your time to work on this project, whatever it is, and you're going to be tired and upset, and there's going to be a bill in the mail, and it ain't, like I said, it ain't the paychecks that are going to keep you going in those moments. It's the passion, it's the drive, it's the knowing what you're doing is helping people. That's really the very first step. Like if you're trying to get into the cannabis industry and you're thinking like, maybe I should be a bud tender, or maybe I should be a cultivator. That's all well and good. But if you want to start a business or really make it in the cannabis industry, step one is finding a way to provide value. You have to provide value to somebody along the way by, again, making their life better, easier, teaching them something, making them laugh, whatever it is. You have to provide some sort of value to someone along that way and help the world. And that fuels your passion. So if you have something that provides enough value, and again, you're receiving these messages from people, that's going to fuel you in those moments when it gets hard, because it's going to get hard. Chances are it's going to get hard. Business is hard. Cannabis business is especially hard. And I encourage everyone to do it, but God dang, do you need that passion to keep you going? Because in the beginning, it ain't going to be the paychecks.
As part of this overgrow mission, what is some of the equipment? Do you have like a go-to list of materials or bill of materials to kind of get people started?
Absolutely. That earth box I mentioned earlier, the sub-irrigated planters, and there's a few different versions. There's like a city picker, which is a smaller one. There's an earth box, which is the ideal one. And it's just, dude, it's good organic fireweed on autopilot. Like, let me put it this way. If you have land outdoors, so where like your neighbors aren't going to see what you're growing or smell, you're going to bother them with smell, right? Or if you even care about that, if you're in a legal state, you can take one of these earth boxes, fill it with good cannabis soil, stick it out in the sun. It's going to grow a monster. Just fill that tube with water. You're going to have a plant taller than yourself. And in a massive harvest. You don't have to pay for a tent. You don't have to pay for a light. You pay $40 for an earth box and $40 for soil. I've literally, and then a pack of seeds. Get some premium seeds for $50, and you will have a lot, depending on the strain. Like you could get a pound. So sub-irrigated planters, they're dummy proof. They're pour water down a tube. You put in the good soil and it's organic. That's an organic way to grow. You're not using bottled synthetic nutrients, which are very fine and effective, but people love the organic label and the organic flavor, and you get the worms crawling in your soil. It's all natural. It's incredible. So that's really how I recommend people grow. And then you can bring it inside. Right next to me, the lights are off currently, but I've got my grow tent kit. And now they make it super, super easy. Literally, it's one click. You can get a 2x2 kit for a couple $100, and it has everything you need to grow inside. It's got a tent to keep things dark and odor controlled. It's got a light, fans, filter, everything. AC Infinity is the company. AC Infinity, man, I'll tell you, just really quickly, give you an anecdote. Cultivation equipment has come a long way in the past 10, 20 years. Wolfman used to tell me when they first started selling these tents that you grow plants inside in your own home, they were coming from textile factories overseas that were not, they did not have good safety protocols. They did not have good manufacturing practices. And so people would get these tents, they would unpackage them, set them up, and put plants in them. And the tent material would off gas a chemical toxin and kill the plants inside your tent. That's how bad things were, right?
Yeah.
Fast forward, they figured that stuff out, and then this company called AC Infinity comes along, and they just revolutionized the whole game, man. Like everything is of a higher quality, it's more durable, and like I said, it's all kitted out. So now it's like, I want this big of a grow kit. It ships all folded up in a nice little box. You set it up, you throw a sip in there with some soil, you tune into GrowCast. You're never going to the dispensary for flower again. And you're going to have enough to give to your friends and your family. And you're going to be able to choose the strains that you want to grow and even make your own strains by taking two of your favorites and crossing them. Dude, I get very, very excited about it. And if you got a couple $100, you can change your life. So shout out to AC Infinity, though.
Where do you stand on the seeds versus clones debate? And do you have a go-to place for genetics?
Oh, my God. I love it. So clones are a great way to get tried and true genetics that you know how they already express. So for beginners, I actually really like a clone. If I'm setting someone up and I set up their tent and I get their earth box going, I'll hand them a couple of clones and say, plug these in because they're female. I know they're going to come out great and I want them to have a great experience the first time. That being said, there's nothing more fun than hunting through seeds. There's nothing in the world that's more. You know why? It's because this is something that people have to understand. And maybe as a consumer, you're going to learn something here. There's a genotype, which is essentially you have a cross, right? Like let's say you like OG Kush cross to Blue Dream, right? That's the strain that you like. But you got to understand when those two plants, mated, pollinated each other and created progeny, they created a whole bunch of different seeds. And every seed, the phenotype is individually different. That's why you may have had a Blue Dream that was wildly different than another Blue Dream because they were popped from two different seeds. And much like siblings, they might look similar in certain ways or have some traits that are virtually identical, but they're not really the same person. They don't express the same way, right? Physically right. Or in their interests or their habits or their peculiarities. And you get to see this when you pop all these different seeds. You get to see how much the sisters all look alike. You get to see all these different expressions. And that OG Kush that you find out of that seed, no one has that same strain. Only you do. It's unique biologically. A clone is not. A clone is literally the same exact biology. You took a branch and cut it and rooted it. There is no difference, but popping seed to seed, not just strain to strain, but actual seed to seed, you see so much variation. It's so fun. I really encourage people to do it for that reason.
Have you seen people either from the Growcast community or other people that have transitioned from home grow to industry?
Oh man. Yeah. We work with everyone in between. You mentioned where to get genetics. There's lots of great places. There's lots of great seed banks. I recommend going right to breeders. I work with Rhizo Rich, our breeder at Growcast Seed Co. We have a seed company and we offer genetics. So to answer your question, we have some of our stuff on the shelves in Canada right now. Oh. I want to give a huge shout out to Oscript and the whole Canada chapter, Hort and Lachlan and Lalo and all those guys. I couldn't believe it, man. Like we've got a lot of genetics out there to different growers and even smokers. Maybe you've seen like our Peach Quake got really, really big. We've had some strains that kind of blew up like bigger than the show, which was so fortunate. But to see it on shelves because a Canadian cultivator was able to hunt through some of our stuff, find a winning phenotype, and then grow it for flower and give it to the dispensaries, it brought me right back to that shop with the old lady, right? I was like, whoa, there's our Peach Quake on the shelves for the patients. So, yes, I like to work with members all the time and give people advice in our Q&As and stuff. Transitioning from home grower to professional cultivator, that's one I get a lot. It's a tough transition. Like I said, if you're going for lucrative, you might want to look for an ancillary piece of value rather than just trading your labor as a bud tender or a cultivator. But man, I know a bunch of members who are full-time cultivators and they're just happy as hell. They post their pictures in their big ass greenhouse that they work in. They don't have to worry about pleasing the investors. They don't have to worry about this or that. They just go to work with a whole bunch of plants every single day with a big smile on their face. So yeah, I think we work with people of all different types and I encourage people to take that leap if they want to. I would never discourage someone to do that.
For those cultivators, what are your thoughts on, patenting strains, protecting their IP, or are you more of the it's a plant and the plant should be free?
Yeah, and this is an interesting one because intellectual property rights are a real thing. I really struggle with, and I would have to give this more thought before I was able to kind of host a debate or anything like that. But I really struggle with the idea of patenting a living entity that was, yes, created by you. You had the intellect to say, I think that the earthiness from the OG Kush would pair really well with this trait from the Blue Dream. That was my intellect. I crossed these two strains, and now, like I said, this strain is unique. That those things are all true. But if you understand that OG Kush and that Blue Dream have lineages that go back not hundreds of years, thousands and tens of thousands of years, and then all the way back beyond when humans were cultivating them, right? If you look at how long we've had a relationship with this plant, and them finding, 10,000-year-old crude hemp rope in a burial site in Czechoslovakia. Just let that sink in for a second. So 10,000 years this strain goes back, but you made this last cross. So now sick person A is not allowed to grow it legally. I very much struggle with the morality of that statement. I think that I wish Rich was on here, our breeder, because he speaks on this really well. I think that at the end of the day, there are no laws around it. So like, even if you do believe that, tough shit, we take the opposite approach at Growcast Seed Co. You buy our seeds, you can do whatever you want with them. You can breed with them, you can hunt cuts for them and sell cuts for $10,000. Do whatever you want. It's a plant. There should be no restrictions on the spreading of this plant medicine. And really, all you can do is kind of just act as if, and that's what we do. We encourage people to breed as much as possible, clone as much as possible, start your own seed line. We don't care. This plant's been around a lot longer than us, and we're happy to see you growing it.
Well, and while some MSOs are kind of trying to choke out that home grower market in some areas, we have seen some MSOs like Ethos Cannabis that have tried to partner with home growers. We've seen people that have been paying royalties based off of seed sales. Ethos Cannabis has been partnering with home growers and even putting, if they'll release it, the home grower information on the label. Would you like to see more of that in the industry?
Although I don't know the specifics of those arrangements, yes, I love to see that collaboration. I think that that's where the true like altruism lies, right? And I also think that if you get creative, you can make it equitable and you can make new revenue streams, right? So let's give a few examples. Yes, I love to see when someone is giving a breeder what they deserve. If they make a strain that goes and dominates the market and just, creates all this revenue, they deserve some of that for creating that. And I do love to see that. Absolutely. Another thing that I love to see, just lost my train of thought on that subject. Forgive me.
No. Things that you like to see in terms of partnership,
collaboration. And so one of the things that was really interesting with that is truly knowing like what you're dealing with. I think that as the cannabis genomics evolves, we're going to have more opportunity for people to do things like that, right? You're going to be able to patent a certain type of genetics because we're going to be able to map that sort of thing. And yes, I want to see collaboration between these two worlds. I remember what I said, what I thought. It goes back to the gray market days of California. One of the things you could do is walk into a dispensary and buy some flower from a craft cultivator. And if you liked it, they might have a clone of that strain right there at the dispensary that you would pay premium for. Clones were cheap in Humboldt, but you'd pay $50 right then for this specific one. Wow, this is really good. That's a way for the dispensaries to kind of invite growers in. If that was still the case, I would be going to the dispensary often. 100% I would. And that's another example of that collaboration, right? I don't think we have to be enemies. I think that we can actually grow together and not be at each other's throats, And for me, I've always maintained that as long as you're not actively restricting the rights of home growers, then you're okay in my book. You're in the same, or you're at least in the same boat as me, which is growing this plant for the people and for the patients and for medicine and for recreation.
When it comes to home growing, one thing I've heard is issues with testing, issues with mold or other pests. What are your thoughts on, making sure that people are growing, a safe product, especially if they're using it as a medicine for, immunocompromised people?
That goes back to what we were saying. How are we treating this thing, right? How are we going to have a lax system that this is more like produce? Here's one of the downsides of treating it like coffee. Coffee is often moldy. Like there's mycotoxins and mold and mildew and different pesticide residues. Purity Coffee has tested coffees. And I know there was a lot of controversy on that. I've seen the tests myself. Like, how much of that are we going to allow? And it's funny because people think that because something is legal, it's safe. But I've got news for you. That's not the case. I talk to people all the time who are told to spray something they know they should not be spraying. I talk to people in the black market who I know spray with stuff they should not be spraying. That's one of the reasons that we push home grow, which is the only way to really know what went on your flower is to grow it yourself. I think that the more immunocompromised you are, the more that your customer base consists of sick people with real conditions who are using this as clearly as a medicine, not debatable, great, clearly as a medicine. I think that home grow and caregivers are some of the best options because those are the ones that really care and aren't going to sacrifice the health of the product in order to keep their profit, keep their company running, which you understand, right? Like that's your livelihood, but it's not worth turning what is essentially a plant medicine into a toxic product by covering it with, Avid pesticide or it was Eagle 20 fungicide or whatever it is. That's not, we know those things are bad for human health. And to the point of testing, I am no expert, but I hear a lot of things. And it seems like testing is one of the most inconsistent and corrupt and crazy fields out there. There are states where you shop around tests. There are bad actors. There are good actors. It seems like the Wild West right now, and I hope it gets better. And again, it just puts me in this spot where I just can't help but recommend people grow their own. Like that's the only way you're gonna know there's nothing wrong with it. It's just grow it yourself. So I hope there's more advancements in the testing industry, and I hope that it gets less corrupt from what I hear.
When you grow your own, is it more or less susceptible to human error? Like, are there mistakes that people could make along the way that, if they don't know what they're doing, they could wind up hurting themselves? Or is it pretty, straight? I don't want to say straightforward, but is it less prone to human error?
I know exactly what you're saying, and you're not going to hurt yourself.
Yeah.
You will know. Here's how you hurt yourself with cannabis is exactly what I said before. You take a handful of toxic products that aren't allowed in a lot of states, right? And they're not easy to find. You're not going to accidentally apply Pylon or Avid or Eagle 20. These are things that agricultural people use to save their crop or to prevent stuff that are truly toxic. That's how you create something harmful. Now, if you mess up on your home grow, what you're going to do is not get a yield. You're going to waste your time. That's your biggest risk. And if you buy a $400, $500, $600 grow kit and then you don't get a harvest, that's where I've failed my job. You're not going to try a second time, right? That's why we offer the education. Like we can give you a guide and it's going to get most people all the way through, especially if you follow the steps and do like a sub-irrigated planter, a SIP system. But we have the hands-on help because we want you to get a good first harvest because that's when you fall in love with it and you grow for the rest of your life. To answer your question, there's really not a lot you can do as far as harm, but you can waste a lot of time and then people quit, unfortunately, instead of trying a second time. So that's where we come in. We try to educate people step by step.
I feel like there are way worse things people are already wasting their time on.
I'm just very cautious about that. Thank you. I appreciate that sentiment. I do. Yeah. I have my expensive hobbies. You know what I mean? So I figure $300 for a tent, $400 for a tent, change your life. It's pretty great. It's good for your mental health too, man. Like humans were meant to be around plants. We evolved around plants. Now we go from our home to our car, to our cubicle, to our car, to our home. And it's nice to just like open your grow tent and kind of step into the Garden of Eden and just like bask in the in the aromas. It's great.
Well, Jordan, I really appreciate you taking the time. You've been very generous with your time. Before we get out of here, though, is there anything else you want to make sure the Cannabis Equipment News audience knows about yourself or your work at Growcast?
I appreciate it, man. This interview flew by. Your questions are great. Just grow your own, everybody. Overgrow is where it's at. The most addicting thing in cannabis is when you start growing, because next thing you know, you're going to be growing peppers and herbs and veggies like I am. I encourage everyone, if you're even curious about it, to start today, pop a seed, start growing your own vegetables, your herbs, your cannabis at home. That's really the message of Overgrow. Again, if everybody who wanted to grow did grow, we would all have enough clean plant medicine and healthy food to go around. That's our message. You can find us at Growcast. Again, we have a beginner's course dropping soon. We have a weekly free podcast. We have a Patreon where we'll walk you through. But really just keep at it, guys. Like, I know a lot of people listen to this from in the industry and things are tough. on a lot of fronts in the industry right now. But, if there's another thing we can learn from the coffee industry, we're going to get by. We're going to survive. And those who are passionate and those who are innovative and those who are driven are going to make a difference in the world for the better and help push this plant along and get it into more people's hands and help more sick people feel better. And that's what the name of the game is creating that value. So thank you for having me. And again, check us out at Growcast. And I hope to see you guys again soon.
Me too, Jordan. I hope we get a chance to do it again soon. Well, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com with email the podcast in the subject line. Also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. For Jordan River, founder, host of the Growcast podcast, I'm David Manti. This is the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast, and we will see you next week.
Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.